All right. What a great pleasure it is to be here with my friend Jonathan Claude,
Hmm.
and really grateful to have a nice conversation with you today, my friend. Welcome.
Likewise, Ed, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, I don't feel called to do a lot of things these days, and I'm very much in the present moment. But when I received your invitation, I was like, cool, yeah, this is something that I feel a full body yes to and really excited about. So very grateful to be here.
Thank you. Likewise. And you know, a lot of people recently have asked me questions around starting communities, joining communities, around words like regenerative and new paradigm, and this whole thing that's happening in the world, no matter what vocabulary we use. Um, and me and you have been having a lot of conversations and even a retreat and other things on this subject matter. So I just wanted to talk about this and support people in their journey. And specifically also one of the things that few people talk about that I think you're well versed in is understanding what goes into a community, whether it's a gated eco-village or just a neighborhood like we have here in Santa Teresa and Nosara. What goes in the invisible structures and the actual um, yeah, the things that are not as tangible as how do I build this and raise capital and how do I find the right people, but how to actually make this thing work or explore the unknown together. So to somewhat frame our conversation, but also leave it open fully to what emerges.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
And I think me and you have a tradition of presencing a little bit, and we started before this recording, but decided maybe it's better to do it here with everyone, and just share what's going on in life and what's present for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'll jump right in. I can share a bit. I right in this moment, I feel energized and excited. I woke up with quite some heaviness this morning. I think it's partly because I had like sunstroke last night. I was lying in bed for a while with regenerated on the physical level, but there was some sort of a cloud.
Oh, I think we have a little bit of connectivity issues, but you're back.
Yeah, let me know if it happens again, then I can switch to my mobile line.
Perfect.
So yeah, feeling energized and curious about our conversation and on a more larger cycle. It's a super interesting time for me personally. And I think since I'm so empathic and sensitive also for us collectively, it feels like somehow this new year started off with quite a lot of challenges for many people, or at least for me personally, and I heard it from many friends. And it's really such a deep letting go of old identities, of old ideas. And a big part of that is also letting go of this professional identity that I had. So it's really interesting to see what are the things that really energize me and that I really feel curious about, like this conversation that is more in a professional context, and other things in a professional context just don't excite me so much anymore. And so that's fascinating for me to see how I can less and less tolerate things that are not my highest excitement and rather do nothing all day, or, just chill in the hammock or go surfing or do these kind of things if they're my highest excitement, and not really have the capacity really to do things that I think I should be doing or that others expect of me if they're not fully in alignment with what I want to do. And so that's very interesting and creating a lot of interesting questions, inquiries, how to navigate the 3D world of material regenerativity. How do you earn an income if you don't do the things that used to give an income to you? And can you fully let go and trust and surrender into this deeper sense of being held by the universe? For the last few days, I've been partly out of necessity because there's just no room available currently here in the area, but also partly because of rebellion or boycotting what is happening here in Santa Teresa and other regions where the prices are just skyrocketing, particularly in high season for accommodation. I've been boondocking. I've been just driving with my car and camping on beaches, and it's been so gorgeous. It's been such a fulfilling experience to just wake up to the most beautiful sunrise, to just harvest the fresh coconuts, and in a way feeling so richly gifted, so abundant, and feeling such luxury that I couldn't have in a 5-star resort where I'd be paying $200, $300 a night, and there I'm paying nothing and I receive all this abundance. So it's very interesting for me how there's still a part in me that feels not necessarily ashamed, but like, oh, I'm sleeping on the beach, and it's not that I would have to, I do have the money.
I think we broke up again. Yeah, you're back. It's all good. We could just continue like this, but yeah, it cut out for a little bit.
Costa Rica internet connection, you never know how it'll support you and what you want to create. So.
The new paradigm.
Yeah, but I also take it as a cue to come to the end of a check-in. Has been quite lengthy already, but I just wanted to share that, there's something really interesting happening around identity, who am I, and how that is transitioning. And in a way, I feel like, yeah, it's a death process, but on the other hand, it's also an expansion of who I am and what wants to come, even though that is not quite clear. And that's the scary part about letting really go and not knowing what will come. But from there, it feels like, oh, it's such a rich space, the nothingness, the void. Out of that, everything can be created. And so it's a very exciting time.
I appreciate that and resonate a lot. And I think before I share what's going on with me in the present, just to reflect on what you said about going to the beach and just living a simple life here. It's so common that I have friends who leave one way of life in New York or Europe or wherever they're coming from, and they come here and kind of replicate it. And I mean, kind of replicate it and I did the same, renting a place that's a certain way or continuing to work. And yes, great, we work online, but it's continuing the same cycle with a different backdrop, let's say. And to really immerse in the gifts of a new life and a new place and in the nature fully. I didn't have the balls to do it for a while. And then I went to search for plant medicine retreats that I thought would help, and they did. They changed my life and opened awareness. But again, they're not going to strip away the things that I needed to strip away and do the work that I needed to do. And yeah, that leads me to where I am today, which is normally you don't date things when you record stuff online, somebody told me, but I do want to date it because it's 2022. Last year, 2021 was quite a doozy for many people. A lot of things went on pause. The world changed. There were some beautiful things like animal populations rising again and other stuff. But this year started for me with a big pause. I got sick and I couldn't do any work. Everything started to shut down. My business literally went on pause. Everything in my external life went on pause. And I realized, and also thanks to the help of some friends and community that I work with, that I needed to take a big pause and reconsider what I want to do with my life. Even my business is an altruistic thing. I'm thinking that it's going to help slow down the real estate development and help people really experience neighborhoods like Santa Teresa and Nosara before they go and buy land in Costa Rica and jump into living in an eco village. But even then I wanted to question why and for who, and is this the maximum impact that I can have? And even my image of almost 15 years living abroad and running a retreat center and being Ed the retreat and event guy, and then being Ed the community guy, thinking I know something about community or developing those things. And yeah, I do have experience in it. But again, is this why my soul came to this planet at this time? Is this my greatest expression? And I have no way to know that unless I shut out all of the noise in the outside world. So in a few days, I'll be disconnecting completely to go on what I call an Edpasana, There wasn't any Vipassanas available right now, so decided just to go be in the mountains alone for 10 days and shut off the phone, the email, pause every bill and payment that I have, any relationships and things I'm closing out that I have to be responsive for. I want to do it responsibly. I'm not just going to burn the house down. But I haven't done this ever. I've never taken a pause from work, family, life. And it's both scary because I don't know what's going to emerge. And it's also scary because when I've tried to spend time with myself in this way, it's not comfortable. Emotions arise, things arise. I'm completely sober now. Not that I had any kind of like major things, but yeah, I'd always have either a drink or occasional cannabis or this or that. I've never been fully myself since I can remember, maybe 20 years ago. And I don't know what's going to emerge, but I don't want to make any decisions on the work that I'll do or what I'm going to show up as until I strip it all away. So that's where I meet you today, stripping a lot of these things away, starting already, and yeah, seeing what's going to happen.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing so rawly and authentically. It's really beautiful to feel you. I'm currently reading Bill Plotkin's Soul and Into the Rich Spiritual Darkness. And it resonates a lot what you're sharing, and it's really, I applaud your courage and your honesty with yourself in going into this space, and I'm sure it'll be very, very beneficial for you and the people in your life and beyond. So thank you for following this call of your soul.
And maybe this is a good segue into our conversation, because you're one of the few people I can talk about stuff like this community and things and remove the masks and just be real. Even in the past, I've done workshops and things that are still posturing, still keeping some kind of image. And when me and you talk, it's just a raw conversation usually, and sometimes doesn't have answers. Like I usually love sharing some kind of wisdom or solutions, but if there are ones to share, if not, it's just being in the unknown together, like you said to me once, you know. Yeah, so maybe a nice place to start is, just looking at what's happening now, whether we want to look at Costa Rica or even globally, with people starting to wake up, I think, in a beautiful way that something isn't working. This old paradigm, this 3D world, whatever the words are, it's clearly collapsing in many ways. And people are looking for more. People I didn't even expect, like not my hippie friends even, but friends who are in corporate jobs, starting to look at living in nature, plant medicine, considering some form of community or neighborhood life, and also wondering where to start, or some looking to start these kind of movements and looking for advice and looking for the path to do that. They feel a higher calling. And I think some of it is up to individuals to do. Some of it, I clearly hear people having the same downloads. And I'm like, wow, you guys should work together. It's too many people there. I think if I counted how many people want to build communities and retreat centers who have reached out to me, it's more people than land. And one of the things that we've experienced in Costa Rica is this feeling of like a gold rush of buying land. And my local friends here and indigenous people I've spoken to, have voiced the thing of like neocolonialism or some form of, something that doesn't feel right, even though it has a good intention, but just foreigners buying land, locals getting pushed out, a lack of integration. So wherever you want to start, but just wanted to hear kind of your thoughts on this whole smorgasbord.
Mom who said like, hey, we have a piece of land that we want to buy and we're a group of people who want to start a community. Could you jump on a call with us to have some advice on how to start this community thing. So it's a lot of people who somehow feel pushed either by what has been happening in the last 2 years, or feel called by something, that has been with them maybe for a long time to move into new ways of being. And actually, yeah, the combination of pressure and pull is strong enough for many to actually considering taking that leap now. And one of the things that came to me as you were speaking is this distinction between the intention of why we want to create these kind of communities. And one of the elders that I'm really inspired by is Margaret Wheatley, and she has this beautiful image of these islands of sanity, where we create these pockets within society where the good, the true, and the beauty is preserved and is actually regenerated or enhanced. And she said it's really about creating these islands of sanity that are not survival camps, that are not separate from society in a way, where we retreat and have our gated community and to make a difference there. And so that is one of the things that come.
You broke up a little bit here.
So this distinction between the islands of sanity and the survival camps, to really, and you've been speaking about that a lot in your online course as well, to inquire into what is my motivation to create community, what is my intention to live in that way. And I've been working for the Global Eco Village network for 3 years, so I've seen a lot of communities in Europe. I've been living in community myself for many years, and I've been working in a business where we've been also leading ourselves collectively in a way that created a lot of community. And that was at the heart of our business, consulting other companies into how they can tap into the collective intelligence of living more intimately, working more intimately with one another. So there's a rich territory to explore. And I really feel that, I mean, you've been in many ways also praising that, to start with your own inner world of, where is that impulse coming from to live in community? And the more clarity the way.
Oh, you broke up again a little bit.
Mobile connection so that we have a bit of a
Yeah.
more stable.
All good. All good. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to take a second to do something, or we could just continue as is, as you wish? I'll pause the recording just for a second. All right, we're back.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's a bit bumpy, and I hope it'll flow seamless from here. But otherwise, we'll just play with these limitations, and it'll give us a little meditation pause to, not to speak too quickly. Maybe that's also a good reminder, which happens to me when I get excited about these kind of things. So yeah, to acknowledge that community isn't something that just happens automatically as a byproduct to buying land and developing a business and all these things, but that is something that we can consciously create, and that if we want to have it in a way that is really regenerative, functional, or even, free from major frictions, is something that we need to focus our energy on. In production companies, they say that you need about 20 to 30% of your resources for maintenance to keep the machines running, to refill the oil and whatever is needed. And in our teams, we assume, or in our communities, we assume that it'll just run seamlessly without any attention. And so how do we want to live together? How do we want to communicate? That is one of the things that I would inspire us to have as a mindset, that it is something that we consciously need to focus on.
Yeah, which also requires slowing down. I think an important part of it, because people rush in, even with projects that have certain timelines, and then investors who expect certain things. You know, people ask me for support, and I don't know how to tell them honestly that they're already in a formula for failure or for difficulty because of the speed at which they're approaching. You know, I
Mm,
always use this example of our friend Daniel, who was at our retreat, who bought land and has spent 2 years listening to the land, feeling
yeah.
what is it calling him to do, what is he called to do. I've had some people just buy land to preserve it and not do anything, you know,
Mhm.
just to save the land. Um, yeah, and then on the other side, it's this buzzword of wanting to create community where, you know, when I started to study it, I saw it as a structure of belonging defined in a Peter Block's book, a place
Mm,
where your gifts are at greatest service.
mm,
Nothing to do with a gate and houses and plots of land. You know, I had my Burning Man community and many others. I flowed between communities. So to think that there's just one community that I'm a part of also began to be challenged. Um, but yeah, a lot of those communities also had I don't know, a fraudulent basis meaning not authentic. You know, at Burning Man was such a close example to me of what community could be. But again, we were in the desert, there was substances, there was music and partying. And so this community would last for a week. And in some
mm,
cases, it would continue and we would meet up and we'd start projects together. But in many cases, it didn't, you know, and I started to see what was that real community? I don't know. I'm not saying it is or isn't. It was damn close in many ways. We
mm,
created a city out of nowhere and shared in a gifting economy. So there
mm.
was a lot more community I felt there.
Yeah.
Um, but the most community I felt was recently when I joined this group Leap Forward that my friend Ronit Hertzfeld and some others started some years ago with people from all walks of life, socioeconomic backgrounds, races, and we met online. It wasn't even in person, you know. And the one tenant to what made it more real than almost any other to me was that we were raw. We started to peel back the ego and the fraudulent self and all these different masks and share like our rawest challenges, our fears, our pains. And I really felt seen and heard. And I felt connected because there was no bullshit. There was
Mm,
no it was just us being us and caring for each other.
mm,
And I realized like if we can't do that first among people and be together authentically, I don't think we stand a chance to form neighborhoods or form gated communities or any of this stuff, you know?
mm.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying, and it sparks so many inspirations on my side. One of the things that come into mind are one of the voices, let's frame it this way, is but we don't have time. You know, we need to move fast with all the things that are happening in the world. But it is such a beautiful contradiction in a way. There's this African proverb that popped up in my head. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go together, move slow. So
Mm.
there's so much beauty and truth in that. And one of the other things that came to me as you were speaking is this experience of community in a way also being a skill.
Wow. I love that.
The more that we immerse ourselves in these environments, the way that you just shared, you know, where we are authentic, where we are raw, and where we are also learning to reveal more of ourselves, where we are not ashamed of ourselves and share our secrets that we used to protect and use a lot of energy to hold back, you know, that it's management, you know, we're managing the
Yeah.
personality that we're showing outside. The more that we're in compassionate relationship with ourselves, the more we can open ourselves to others, because we don't have to hold back, we don't have to hide that, because we don't have an identity that we need to protect so rigidly. And one of the things that I experienced a few beautiful times is that something emerges that an author, I unfortunately forgot her name, called Sudden Village, that we come together in these sudden villages. And that is something that we need more and more. I've experienced that happening over a weekend retreat, a weekend festival, you know, that we suddenly became a village that was capable of holding really difficult situations, really emotional spaces, and we were holding it together. And that is something that gives me a lot of hope, where I feel like if enough of us do this inner work to be able to commune in this way, then we can very quickly come together as these sudden villages in the moments where it is needed. And I think there will be a lot of situations in the near future where this quality is needed, that we actually find a coherent intentions to create something that is healing, that is supportive, that is creative in the most beautiful way.
I love that. And it reminds me also of that Rumi quote, like I might be misquoting it, but today I was smart and I wanted to change the world. Tomorrow I am wise and I decided to change myself. And so it is a lot of inner work and inner work together. It doesn't have to be alone, even though parts of it, of course, are, but also sharing that inner work and inner process is key. And yeah, people have this shield up around their ideas, around their process. And the more I share of it, the more I realize the oneness and connection I have. Everyone's going through the same shit, you know, and some share it, some pretend like they're not. Others feel like they have to be the hero in the hero's journey and save the world. And one of my mentors is like, Ed, what world do you have to save right now? Like, what are you saving? Like this, you don't have to do any of this stuff. Take care of yourself. Become whole, and then from that wholeness, share. And still, even when he said it, it took me up until now to even start to really understand that. Oh yeah, but I'm doing this, or I have an obligation, and I'm running this place or this business, and fuck, pause.
And one of the that people are bringing, and that you're inviting this self-compassion, you know, that even if you have an aspiration to be the community leader who takes all the decisions, then rather be honest and be authentic with that and own it, instead of pretending that we are a self-organized team where everything is decided by everyone, but secretly you are still controlling and holding on to that. You know, own that desire that you maybe just want to live by yourself and that you don't want to live in a community. I think it's better than, you know, pretending to live in a community and forcing yourself into an idea of a way of living that you feel would be more in alignment with what others want you to be.
Yeah, and look, one part of it is kind of hard in the practical sense that I've seen. You know, I was talking with a friend who wanted to buy a very large swath of land. We're talking about 1,000 acres plus, and I resonated with his vision for the land and everything. And when I asked him why, he said, well, down the street, there's these developers who are just buying up land and chopping it and selling it and really like cutting trees, doing all this stuff you don't want to be doing. So I want to make sure this land is saved, you know? And I was like, wow, okay, that feels like an honest intention. But then what, what is it going to be saved for? And is that his role to now, not stress, but really like think and, you know, who's the investor? How do I do this? Who's the team to do this? And I don't know. I did feel a good intention. Like let's make sure this land, because it will definitely, like you can see how they're buying in a row more and more land to do this. So I understood his intention, and yet I was like, something still, like I don't know. Something still felt interesting to me. Whether that's the way to do it. Yeah, and how to keep locals also integrated in that process, because even in that altruistic intention, most of the time local people are not living in these eco villages or larger projects. They move out. Even if we offer them free land or discounted land, they're like, we don't want to be with your hippie plant medicine taking friends, you know. So that's another thing that's come up a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of bit, that yeah, there's a lot of natural destruction, even for a good cause, to create these things. And I haven't seen one person really tell me how to do something that integrates with the local communities. I won't even go so far as indigenous, because there's very few indigenous people in Costa Rica left, but even locals, because it doesn't have to be like some indigenous tribe, but even just our local friends in Nosara. I have a friend who cuts down for sale signs just because he's so pissed that his whole town is for sale, you know,
Yeah.
and I feel his pain. I don't know a solution. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I'm right there with you in the unknown. And this is one of the points where I also don't have an answer, you know, and yet I
Yeah.
feel the pain. I feel it very viscerally of like, wow, that makes me really sad to see, you know, how difficult it is to move beyond the patterns that we've been starting to, you know, or embarking to change, and yet we're reproducing the same thing and being part of that. And yeah, I'm sitting with the unknown,
Yeah.
with that question. And I think that's, you know, without removing myself from a place of responsibility, I think that's the first step, and to acknowledge that, wow, I really don't know.
Yeah. I really don't know. That's one thing I felt very comfortable when we had our retreat. I don't even like that word so much, but our gathering was, yeah, just the comfort of saying, I don't know, with a group of 20 people. Let's
Mm,
start to feel, let's start to talk, but we don't know.
mm,
Let's be honest, you know?
yeah.
And I know a lot of experts. I feel like I could ask almost anyone in the world, I need a question, but they don't know either.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
really, they don't, you know? And yeah, I applaud kind of, you were the one who I think said it like first to me, is to be okay with sitting in that unknown together is a huge step. Just that, you know?
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that have intrigued me about community is the potential for growth that comes from being confronted with these kind of questions. And there are so many ways that living in community, or being in community, even as you described it, can speed up our own development, because we're confronted with questions that we haven't been confronted with before, and that in a way cannot be found on the outset, but that require us to be someone else, to be the one who has the answer. And one way for me to see community is that all other people around me are reflections of myself. They mirror something back to me. And so if we look at this question of how can we create community, how can we create homes and living environments that are integrated with nature, that are integrated with the local community, for me, it also brings, for my inner world, what are the parts within myself that I'm pushing away, that I push beyond the gate, that I'm pushing outside of my awareness, because it's just too painful to look at that. And then it brings up all, you know, on a collective level, the whole healing that hasn't happened yet, the reconciliation of colonialism. But it also brings up, for me personally, these parts, you know, where I would rather not look into all the parts that I shame, that I exclude, all the things that I'm holding back while I'm presenting myself as a successful entrepreneur. You know, there's also a small little child that hasn't been getting enough attention and love in the way that it would have needed, you know, and that I'm
Yeah.
excluding in my everyday personality. So on one hand, looking at our shadows, that's an immense potential. But then also on the other hand, you know, using community as a mirror to mirror back to us our strengths, our gifts, our potential. And one of the things that I always, when I work with businesses, is try to inspire, is to come from a place where you only do things that are your highest excitement. And how can we support each other in an environment that brings out that in us, you know, where we got each other's back and know what is your zone of genius, and can I, in a way, give you a feedback when you're not operating in your zone of genius and doing things that are actually not your highest excitement. So to have these
Yeah.
both, you know, the shadow work, but also, you know, the growth potential of moving more into and doing the things that we really love, or as I also like to frame it, how do we create a regenerative life, a life that we don't need a vacation every 3 or 4 months from?
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. I like one, the something you said a little bit ago, which was like the rubbing, just us being together and rubbing and seeing what comes up. Things start to emerge when we ask these difficult questions, and rubbing ourselves with ourselves is, yeah, I totally agree, by the way, that my external reality is a reflection of my internal one. There's war outside, there's definitely war inside. Um, and so before thinking about anything external, yeah, how am I living in, how do you call it, in a life integrated with local people here? I feel like I do to a certain extent, very much so, but even deeper, how can I push that? How do I live sustainably or regeneratively? I try a lot of things, but every year I'm finding more things that I could do, less waste, more recycling, less use of resources. So I guess there is a lot of inner work first to see, okay, how can I be the change, or how can I be to my best at all times, to my capacity of living in my truth and also in my excitement. This shit doesn't have, it sucks and it could be tough, but it also, we have to have fun on this journey. We're here for a short period of time on this mud ball, just a speck of sand in the universe, got to make something of it too. I also see friends who are quite depressed with this subject matter and just retreat into themselves. And yeah, I mean, it's I think there is something in living the way that, yeah, really walking the walk, no bullshit. And I asked a friend, Ronit, who actually studied with a lot of the spiritual leaders that I admire, Ram Dass and Thich Nhat Hanh and all these others. And even among like these 20 names of people that she mentioned who've written all these bestsellers, she was like, man, a lot of them didn't walk the walk, only until this one had a stroke, or, except for Thich Nhat Hanh, who happened to be a great example. But yeah, also realizing that I put all these people on a pedestal, again, that is false.
I was about to go there, because that can also, again, become another self-obsession of being more regenerative and pushing ourselves really hard, and to acknowledge, our nature as limited human beings, also being compassionate with that, not making that another identity that we need to push ourselves hard to fulfilling certain standards and expectations that we have on ourselves, or the voices that we've internalized. Times are too serious.
I was going to say, it's a moment of a slight pause. Whenever we have that delay, I'm like, ooh, reflect for a little bit. But yeah, go for it. You were saying times are too serious.
Right. So here comes the quote: "The times are too serious to lose our humor." And I think there's something really beautiful in that, because I see either people who are very aware of what's happening in the world, also on a metaphysical level, and who get really depressed by it, or I see people who are completely ignorant of what's happening in the world right now and just living life as normal. It's like, what? No, the weather is great. Why should I worry? Like just going on their tracks and just completely blinding out all the things that are happening left and right from them. But it's very rare to find people who are fully aware of what's happening in the world and yet be full of joy and excitement about life. And I find myself also struggling with it, to find that balance of like, in the present moment right now, everything is perfect and okay, and I don't need to worry about anything. And, there is an evolution happening, which I'm taking part in, where I can contribute in a way to, to have an impact on where we're going together.
And I think you nailed it there. That's, in wholeness is both. It's not either or. It's having compassion that, fuck, people, there are concentration camps right now in North Korea. There's things that we think, there's atrocities I don't even see on the news and I know are happening. And yet there's these beautiful things and these beautiful experiences in my life. And that togetherness, it's not good or bad, hot or cold. It just, it is the completeness of the moment that we live in. Yeah.
And on a spiritual level, that is one of the things, that I'm still grappling with the most, I think, to acknowledge that to be human and to enjoy this beautiful life is very intimately connected with death. And that just by the way that I live, or not even, I'd even say independent of the lifestyle that I'm living, I will cause death to other beings. I will step on an ant accidentally. I will eat food that kills a plant, even if I'm vegan, there's still life that is being consumed and transformed through me. And only by having a wider understanding of the cycle of life and death, can I actually really open myself fully to feel fully what's happening, to be fully aware of my impact on this world, which will in some ways be destructive, but also at the same time be fully in appreciation, in joy, in gratitude, and enjoying the pleasures of being in this human body and being at peace with all of that. I think that is one of the big, open my heart to have a full yes to what's happening and to acknowledge, that on a deeper level, it's all good. It's all nature, and it's bigger than my limited understanding of what I think is good, what I think is right, and how I would want things to be.
Yeah, I think that acknowledgement of death, there's a book called The Denial of Death that I want to read by Ernst Becker. But just even having talked about it with a friend who read it, just that acceptance of death and really accepting it in its many formats and realities as this thing that we run away from, or that we fear, or that, it's very hard to fully acknowledge death. Even if someone has taken plant medicine and they've died, again, it's close, it's there, but it's a reality that I think I haven't even begun to fathom in its true complexity. And someone said we had a talk by a guy who I respect a lot, Tom Newmark, who founded Finca Luna Nueva and the Children's Eternal Rainforest. He's one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, like ecological warrior for God knows how many years. And he was talking about like the carbon in the universe and in the atmosphere and sequestering it. And someone said, well, is it too late? And he was like, it's definitely too late. Like what's done cannot be undone. It's not to say that we just go burn fossil fuels and forget it, but there's a certain amount that's baked in. And there were like, this person at our retreat center at the time was like, his face went pale and he's like, well, what do we do? And he said, we who? We as a human race or the planet? Because he said, I could tell you as a fact, the planet will take care of this. It might be ugly. It might wipe us off with some kind of pole shift and tidal waves, but it regenerates always. Could take 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, but don't worry about it taking care of itself. Like this human race is what we should think about, in the animals and the plants and all the creatures in our existence, but it will be okay. And it really reframed shit for me. It kind of put it in a perspective where I was like, oh, okay. Damn.
Yeah, and it reminds me of an interview that I did with Margaret Wheatley at one of the festivals that we hosted. And she was very clear, and in that way also, taking a lot of bullshit out of the conversation by very clearly saying, no, there is no more place for hope. We're beyond that. And really what is needed is not our personal purpose or asking what we want from life, but really reframing it. What is it that life wants from us? Where does life want us to be of service? And how can we become these warriors of the human spirit? And it is so difficult for my mind at least, to understand. But in many ways, I also believe that trying to mend and fix and maintain things on the 3D is just futile in so many ways. But the intention with which we're doing things, that can become an embodied prayer that will, in a way, ripple out and have us experience synchronicities and miracles beyond the human mind of what we can linearly comprehend. And so that is a lot more important, because otherwise I would go crazy, like, wow, there's so much happening. I should be doing so much to save the planet.
Yeah.
I don't have time to care for an old woman who wants to cross the street. I don't have time for that. I need to focus on saving the world. But with that attitude, I'm closing my heart. How can I open my heart fully to what's happening in the present moment, accepting all that is and doing it with this open heart that allows me to be fully present.
And I like that you said miracles too, because maybe there's an answer I don't know right now, but when I'll be at a certain place and connection to a part of myself and expressing, there's some kind of surprise from the universe, and I'm like, oh wow, like you didn't see, you're walking around the bend in a pond and you're on in a river and you're on your last stone and you're like, wow, I can't see where to step, but you leap out and you're like, oh wow, I couldn't see beyond that curve, but there was another stone. So I am hopeful, also that there are, yeah, that there are miracles and there are things that are unknown to me now, that as soon as I take another step, I'll see the next step. But again, I think that's going back to the beginning of our presencing. Why I want to pause for a while, business and everything, is I really don't know my authentic self the way I want to. I don't feel really what's in there. I think I know who I am. I've done events since 15 years old. I've gathered people. These are parts of my persona. But to be honest, I don't freaking know who's in there when I break through that liminal, scary space that was formed when my ego and my fraudulent adult was birthed to help this flailing child who was abandoned or whatever other things might have happened with my family. I haven't even pierced through to be with that child and feel its pain and feel what's going on. And yeah, that's the only next step that I saw. And surprisingly feels good to take this pause, but there's so many things I'm like, wow, I gotta pause WhatsApp, I gotta pause emails. I feel like I have all these obligations to others that I really don't. Like I have an obligation to myself to be authentic and hear that voice. And that voice is muffled by a lot of sounds right now that I have to put on mute, you know?
It's interesting, as you're sharing your personal story, what comes up is this collective story that we've been in for the last 2 years, where especially in the beginning, you know, the world was put on hold and all of a sudden dolphins come to Venice, you know, and swim in the canals again. And how quickly nature regenerates when we pause. And I think in many ways, it's the greatest gift that we can do to this planet, to pause and to slow down and to actually be with what is and turn towards what's in front of us instead of always, you know, longing for the next iteration and the next version of reality that might be around the corner. And I remember also like this day where Facebook was offline for half a day and how frantic some people became, and Pornhub statistics skyrocketed, you know, like so much more visitors there. It's so interesting to see how we're jumping on the next consumption to distract us from ourselves. But I think it would be so healthy for many of us to actually come into this space of pause, of slowing down for us as a collective, because then, you know, you cannot ignore these voices within yourself that either show up as the inner child, as the shadows, as the trauma that is creeping up to the surface and want to be seen, or once that has been impulse coming up with like, wow, this is what I'm really excited to do now. And it's not coming from the conditioned mind that this is what I should be doing because that's how my parents and my society taught me to be, but more like right now in this moment, this is my highest excitement, and it comes from the body and not from the mind. So that's a very interesting space and a very rewarding territory to endeavor into.
So let me ask you a question about that, because so I have friends who are in the middle of building eco-villages or just about to launch. I have friends who are just, you know, have bought land in Nosara and are building their house. It's easy, you know, let's say in some cases to pause, but when you have obligations to investors, construction companies, you feel like you're already moving so much. How do you see people like that pausing if they're like, fuck, like they listen to this and they resonated and they're like, man, okay, I want to pause my eco village, or at least just for a bit, but it's in motion. What do you do then?
Great, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think the two of us, what we've been presenting here from our lives is quite a radical version of that. And I think in many ways we are pioneers, and there's some sort of a call within us, you know, to go to that edge so that others can follow that path, that we're in a way creating territory. And I think for others, it doesn't have to be quite that radical. Even just creating, as you said, slowing down and creating space in your life can be so tremendously helpful to become more aware of that. even if it's just 20 minutes of journaling or meditation in the morning, these can be the first very simple steps, but then also sharing what's alive within you with other people and making use of a resource of community, or using that as an opportunity to create community and say like, hey, I know we're just running full speed with our project here, and there is a part of me that is really overwhelmed where I feel like I don't want to do anything at the moment. How can you support me? And finding support within your community of like, hey, maybe I can take over some of the tasks that you're having and make sure that you're not filling your to-do list with other things that replace that, but really use that time as 1 hour vision quests a day, of where you just sit by the waterfall, or have these micro adventures that lead you into the rich spiritual darkness of your soul, to do this underworld inquiry, and knowing that I'll have a set container, I have a time frame that I'll dedicate to this inquiry, and then I can emerge again, and then I'll go back into it, instead of having it like a 10-day complete pause. Have it in intervals during the day. That makes it more manageable as a start.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that would allow the personal inquiry too to start to see what answers emerge and what feelings emerge. And the other thing that I think when we were saying rubbing up against each other is actually then connecting with other people, building community or living in community or in your community around you, and seeing what comes up for them. Again, without any pretense of like, we're going to figure something out, but just asking questions, rubbing, seeing things come out, feeling less protective about like, oh, but this is my idea and I don't want to share certain intellectual property. But I think the rubbing with others and the pause to go inward are 2 huge tools. And I think at the end we can also share some more resources, but I really love the website of Leap Forward that I mentioned. It's leapforward.us, and they have a website called pause.us that's within there. And it shows this entire map of being, which to me, I've studied like philosophy and personal development since about 15 years old. I've never seen somebody give me that tool before, which is a map of the swamp that is the human condition. It's not giving necessarily all the answers, but it's at least like we're in this like foggy swamp, and it's saying, hey, here's a map so you're not fully lost. So I think, they're also in an emerging process, but they don't charge any money. They're just sharing this stuff, and it's a resource that anyone could use and reach out to. So any other resources like that maybe that come to mind, we could share with people, and I could put in the links here and stuff like that. Wow, this is I'm just, as we're talking, I'm just feeling into this conversation, and I'm like, I think out of so many years of giving talks at festivals and workshops and all this stuff, I'm like, this is the most honest. And I still think looking back in another few years, I might be like, wow, I could have been more honest, but this is the most raw and honest I feel like I've been in sharing some of these things. And and just seeing you reflect that too with your honesty, I'm really grateful. And we could keep talking. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, beautiful. I really, really resonate with that. And there were many moments where I had these truth bumps as you were speaking, or as I was speaking, where I really felt these tingles all around my body, and like, oh, yeah, there's something opening here that is really beautiful, and creating a space within. We can be surprised by what we're saying ourselves. I love that.
And still parts where I'm like, oh, I said something that I'm like, did that come from the ego fraudulent self still? So it's a process too. We're human, but I think the best we can do is just to be present and share these things with each other, and hopefully support people on their journey.
And again, not lose our 3D world of bureaucracy and material possessions and separation and all these things that are still around us.
We're still in the world and of the world. It's a reality, and it's a process too. I think I was talking to my friend Alex, and she said nature's solutions are so much slower than ours, and just wrapping our heads around how much time some of this takes to find change within us, to find change on a larger level, takes time. Even as we had some connection issues, wow, it took me a little bit of time to be okay with just pausing for a second. It's okay, he's going to be back in 3 seconds. It's the speck, you know? So yeah, just being gentle with ourselves there.
For me, the most beautiful episodes in my life are the ones where I can be fully okay with what's happening and see there is a larger intelligence behind that. So not to see like, oh, there's a technical difficulty, I need to fix that. No, like, what is this actually as a gift? What's the gift in this right now? How can I reframe it in a way that I see how this is actually benefiting and happening for me instead of to me?
Yeah, I definitely have faith in the larger intelligence at play. And yeah, the more I could be open and receptive to that and be guided by that, like it's just the surrendering process, and it hands you what's next to do in a way, as long as we're listening and receptive. And yeah, that's the part that I think involves removing some clutter, which is something I'm doing and can do. But yeah, it's a delicate process where I'm still like, wow, how much more can I peel off of this onion just to see what's down there at whatever pace it takes. And yeah, again, without killing oneself. And yeah, it takes courage to feel all this stuff and feel emotions and go deep. And it's also a beautiful life to live. So it's that play of doing the work and also in gratitude of, fuck, this existence, like what awe do I have, like to see these birds flying and the wind. And I looked at the moon over San Jose yesterday from our home, and I'm like, fuck, this universe is so beautiful. Even in my internal chaos, I'm looking outside and I'm like, wow, what a gratitude, like, for this thing called life. It's like this when it goes by,
Totally. One of the questions that I think in a way nicely circles my inquiry on a personal level for the last few beautifully summed up by one of the channelings that I received from Richard Rutt, who developed the Gene Keys, which is a beautiful system. I think combines astrology, the Enneagram, and the I Ching. And he has one of the gene keys that I have in my chart is the 10th gene key, which is the path from self-obsession to naturalness to being. And I find that so often in my life that I'm so self-obsessed. And it's a gift, to be so self-aware, to be so self-reflective and all these things, but it can lead to the self-obsession. And I first had that in my professional life of like, cool, this is who I am, and I was so obsessed with my identity there, and then transferred it to the spiritual, like finding out the Atman project, who is this Jonathan? Who is I? Then being obsessed with that question to a point where it becomes painful. And the path that he describes, the gift in that, is moving towards naturalness, looking at nature and see how the tree doesn't ask, what is my purpose? Why am I here? But really just is and comes to the state of being. And there is such a beautiful way out for me in this path from self-obsession to more of the naturalness that I can sense is unfolding slowly, and being okay with just being. And also, what came up for me was how difficult it is for me to accept how life is taking care of me. And there's this voice inside my head that says like, right now, it's okay to enjoy all this amazing food and these beautiful beaches and the life that you're living. But one day it'll be gone and then you'll suffer. So you better don't enjoy it fully now. And
yeah,
it's just so bizarre, And I've, to be honest, never really experienced that. I was never in a place where I didn't have food. I was never in a place where I didn't have a home. I was always somehow taken care of. Yet this fear, I don't know where it comes from, Is it ancestral? Is it collective? It's somehow still within my body. And to be with that and to acknowledge like, wow, there's a fear, even though everything's perfect right now, there's a story that I'm making up that something wouldn't be perfect or would be difficult in the past that is taking me out of the present moment. So there's a deep longing within me for that naturalness. And I think many of the problems that we see in our world today on a collective level as well is stemming from this self-obsession or the difficulty of being okay with what is in the moment. And we find all kinds of ways to overconsume or to put ourselves into rank dynamics with others, comparing us, making us better, stronger, competition, and all these ways, where we separate ourselves from others. And I see the way out is coming together. And like a way, I guess, brings us back to the theme that we initially started with, community. How can we come back to a place where we don't have to find solutions to our individual problems and be, the ones who got it, who are kicking it, and who are the big investors, or these identities where we're like, oh, we're on top of the wave, but where we acknowledge, like, sometimes I'm on top of the wave and sometimes I'm in a trough and I'm in a really dark place. And I'm glad I don't have to be there alone in either of these places, where I have people around me who love me unconditionally for who I am. So you spoke about belonging, and that's something that is really very present for me. Where can we find these places of belonging where we know that we're not just loved for what we do, but for who we are, and find that acceptance within ourselves, but also see it mirrored back in others. And there are times, where honestly, I feel others can love me more unconditionally than I can love myself. And then they teach me how to do it. And that's really, one of the most powerful ways how community can actually heal us, in my experience.
Oh, I love that. It's such a comforting thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's 2 people, 3 people, 50 people, but we're not alone. We are in a spiritual cosmic sense in some way, but in a reality here on planet Earth, we're not. And the more we can dissolve that aloneness with our masks and all the things, and really connect with people, and really be together, and see each other for who we are, see the shadows, see the bright sides, and just be together and share in a compassionate way our authenticness and our humility to this thing called life, asking questions, getting lost, figuring it out, having fun. To me, so far, that's the only thing in community that I felt is real right now, is that I have people around me who are there for me, are really, really there for me. And if those little nucleuses of people combined and grew, I could see us in a different form of society. I think in conversations with God, he calls it Hebs, highly evolved beings, that they could feel, they don't need to use words, they can feel each other completely. And there's no, and it's hard to imagine that world, but there's, your basic needs are covered. And I'm like, holy crap, if that was the case, food, shelter, and we're just together, wow, just wow. And it'll, we'll get there somehow. But yeah, I think at least on the side of community in this conversation, just being together authentically, rubbing, sharing, dropping out of community in some extents to be alone with ourselves, to grow in that authenticness and wholeness. That's the work, I guess.
That's the path that I see we're going. I think that is what is ahead of us if we choose to. So this sense of abundance of our basic needs taken care of, not just in terms of food and shelter, but also in terms of community and connection. And the question of what would we do if there weren't any problems to solve? What would the human species be capable of if all our energy could be directed towards creativity and play? And this is ultimately what we are here to do, to express our highest gifts, to share our gifts with the world, and to play, and to enjoy life and the pleasure of the 5 senses, and to bring it more down into the concrete and practical, and down from these lofty ideas. Even though Richard Rudge said so beautifully, as humans, we are lofty beings. So don't keep yourself small and, ground yourself too much into the limitation. To be in these lofty ideas, there are people who are bringing it to the world already. I know of a community that are experimenting with an alternative currency that is based on the blockchain, a cryptocurrency that gives unconditional basic income to everyone who signs up. You need to be vouched by 3 people so that it's made sure that you are actually a human being, but then you get a certain amount domain. And you can sign up and get this unconditional basic income every month. And all of these cryptocurrencies and alternative currencies somehow face the challenge of how can it, be linked to the fiat system and buying actual goods in a supermarket, for example. But one of the investors, he did a beautiful move. He said, for the people who are living in that community, he will pay the rent in euros to the landowner for 2 years, and people can pay their rent in circles. So they have an incentive to start trading with circles and giving their offers, their goods and services in circles so that they can actually pay their rent with it, and creating a small ecosystem where this is also already a functional currency. And I think examples like that are really beautiful prototypes of how we can move into an environment, into an ecosystem of abundance where we support each other and where we realize that, wow, actually scarcity is built into the capitalistic system, not into nature. Nature is so overabundant that you see how many flowers a tree produces and no one's asking like, wait a minute, is that cost efficient what you're doing there? It's so much about beauty and overflowing. And I think in so many ways, we have the potential to go there as well. And these small prototypes, are just like first glimpses of like, okay, these could be technical, logistical.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like a lot of people automatically shun cryptocurrency and the blockchain. And so much of it is also just another version of the 3D world with its same things. But I also truly believe that it's one of the few technologies I've seen that emerge that can have the possibility to create some of these things that we've talked about, and universal basic income and things like that. Just the technology itself, not saying that one project is already doing it, like this prototype that you mentioned, that's far beyond many things I've heard of, and maybe it's the solution, maybe it's a step towards the solution, but I really, and it's a whole nother rabbit hole, but I really do believe that the blockchain offers us a step towards the future. Not even cryptocurrency, the blockchain itself and the way it's set up, I'm very hopeful for. Yeah.
And I want to tie it back also to our topic of community, because one thing I think is to create local communities that actually work. And I haven't seen many that really, continuously work when there is a certain intimacy and closeness involved. And there's a lot of things that are still coming up. And my sense is that these communities are pioneering a territory where a lot of old baggage needs to be purged. But they're blazing the trail, so to speak. Won't be long until we really see communities that will not be high maintenance as the communities that I've been living in, where you need to invest a lot of energy, a lot of sharing circles and meetings to actually make it work, which I don't think is how community is meant to be. And as we're in these early days of really creating that field, or that morphogenetic field almost, for functional communities that are low maintenance, that are regenerative in the true sense of the word, I think what then will become interesting is to see how can we scale it from a local community that is really working to eventually global or cosmocentric networks. And I do believe that technologies like blockchain or cryptocurrency can play an important role in that, to have what I've seen framed as transitional trust. I trust you, so I trust also the people that you trust. And in that way, networks of trust can grow very quickly, exponentially. And how can we implement that into a technological framework that allows local communities where people have real relationships, real bonds, and expand that between other communities, or between eventually the whole human family and beyond. So I think there's a beautiful path that is already, like glimpses of that visible, of like, I don't know how it'll work. I'm still very much in the unknown, and I have a sense it could be a path that makes that possible.
I love that. Yeah, it gets me super excited. I'm like, okay, there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We're not there yet, but there are paths and new bricks being laid in the road, people paving the way to new ways of thinking that, it could be possible. And I love that word transitional. Someone explained to me also transitional ethics, like even some of the things we discussed today, until we get to that certain point, there's still something you could be doing that's better than. even if somebody says, oh, but that's not good that you're ordering stuff on Amazon. My friend was making the point of a coconut scraper for coconut milk. He's like, yeah, Ed, you shouldn't use Amazon maybe, but if you're ordering that coconut grater that's going to save thousands of Tetra Pak coconut milk cartons that you're going to use in transitional ethics, that's okay, because it's helping you get from a place here to a better place. And it really, yeah, it made me feel comforted in the fact that it's not just an either or, that we're on a way towards something, and we can move towards there and not have to be these purists that are like, oh, fuck, you know.
Love that. Yeah, that's a great framework that also helps me to resolve some ethical issues that I'm constantly struggling with. Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think we've been talking for a good amount of time, so maybe this would be a good place to pause this conversation. But before we end it, I just wanted to ask you, if people wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about you, what's a way to do that? What's a way to reach out or to read about you, or to, yeah, just to be more in your universe?
I do have a website. It's not the most up to date around all the things that I'm doing or not doing these days, but it has the basic information and my contact details. It's Jonathan Claude, Klodt is the last name .com. And there you can also sign up for my mailing list or find current offerings that I have running at the moment.
Great. I'll make sure to include that when this video is posted. Man, so grateful just to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. And it really sparked the curiosity to keep on doing that and to continue these conversations with you and with others. And yeah, in a way, I feel a sense of grounding and expansion in my body, of like roots growing, like a relaxation that grounds me to the earth, of like, yeah, I don't have all the answers and I don't need to, and it's okay to be in this human life. So yeah, thank you for this conversation, which in many ways was very emergent for me, where I surprised myself saying things that I was saying, and really, you know, like picked up the fruits that you were sharing and could build on that.
Yeah, there was definitely yeah, a presence and ping-ponging from each other that just emerged naturally, that I appreciate. I'm excited to post this video. I think it'll be on YouTube and on Zaydel.com on my website, and I will post it in the online course that I'm doing now, because I think it's one of the more important and authentic shares I've had in a while with somebody. So really grateful.
Let's keep doing this. I love co-creating with you. Thank you so
Eso,
much.
mi amigo. Let's do it. All right. Thank you, my friend. I'm going to end this recording here.
Thank you.